Good day to you. Welcome back to our reading of the book Prayer by M.L. Andreasen. We are on chapter 1 titled In God's Presence. And there are 4 sections in this chapter. Section 1. It is considered a great honor and a rare privilege to be received in audience at a royal court, even though 100 others are received at the same time. There is considerable rivalry among visitors to the British Isles to obtain the much coveted invitation to a palace function where they are introduced to royalty. If invited, they spend much time preparing for the occasion. It is indeed the event of a lifetime. They read carefully the rules which govern their appearance, the proper way of addressing royalty, and what they may do or not do in the royal presence. The occasion is never forgotten, and if any remark is addressed to them by royalty, the words are ever cherished. We need not attempt to compare or contrast such an occasion with that of appearing before the Most High God in private audience. If the one is wonderful, the other is 1,000 times more so. There can, in reality, be no comparison, only contrast, for God is beyond compare. In prayer, we enter the presence of God, the audience chamber of the Most High. Not as on earth are we ushered into an outer reception room with hundreds of others, but into the throne room itself, the inmost sanctuary of God, for a private audience with the ruler of the universe. It is doubtful that even the greatest of the saints fully appreciate the honor thus bestowed. And this honor is granted the lowliest of men. Wonder upon wonders. In private prayer, as in public worship, we too often engage in communion with God as a matter of duty or custom, and repeat certain phrases without thought as to their meaning. It is a pious practice learned from others or remembered from childhood. We cling to it as something we ought to do. We feel that if our prayers seem to do little good, at least they do no harm. Such is a far cry from what God intends prayer to be. Prayer is not a common occasion for which no preparation is needed. It is an audience with God. God's plan for man. We need to understand more about prayer than we do. Why does God want us to pray? He knows what we need, so why does He not simply give us what we ought to have? What are the conditions upon which rests the answer? What may we expect from prayer? In God's universal plan, men were intended to occupy a high position as co-workers with Him. To prepare them for this work, they were to be subjected to certain tests to ascertain if they were worthy of their future high calling. If they stood these tests, they were eventually to take their place as members of the household of God. Such a plan involved a period of instruction and training which would demonstrate their capacity for learning the necessary lessons. During this time, they would have the opportunity of deciding whether or not the life promised them by God as a reward for their work was worth the discipline necessary to meet the standard God has set for inclusion in His family. At any time, they would be at liberty to terminate the agreement. And should they once more change their minds and wish to return to their allegiance to God, He would give them the opportunity until they at last had irrevocably settled the question for or against God. If their decision was against life, they would eventually return to the earth whence they came. If they chose life and passed successfully their period of instruction and the final examination, they would be invested with life everlasting and be officially installed as the sons of God. In the beginning, there was open communication between man and his Maker. God was one with man, and the record states that He walked in the garden in the cool of the day. Prayer, such as we now know it, was unknown. Man did not fall to the ground when he talked with God. They communed one with the other as friends do, and as Moses did later. The Lord spake unto Moses face to face, as a man speaketh unto his friend. Exodus 33, verse 11. There was perfect fellowship, as between father and son. God talked with man, and man talked with God. After sin came in, this close fellowship ceased. Says God, "Your iniquities have separated between you and your God, and your sins have hid his face from you, that he will not hear." Isaiah 59, verse 2. While sin made a separation between man and God, and no direct communication was possible, man was not entirely shut off from God. A way of approach was opened through Christ, and in his name man could reach the ear of God. Jesus Christ declared, "No man cometh unto the Father but by me." John 14, verse 6. "Whatsoever ye shall ask of the Father in my name, he may give it you." John 15, verse 16. According to this, the way to the Father, and the only way, is through the Son. Through him we may come, and whatever we ask in his name, we shall receive. This is the new and living way which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. Hebrews 10, verse 20. This new way was first prefigured by the sacrifices offered to God in Old Testament times. These sacrifices were ordained to help man keep in mind that he was a sinner, and as such deserved death, but that a way had been found by which he might come back to God and find access through the death of the sacrifice. Thus we find that Cain and Abel brought their sacrifices to God in process of time. Genesis 4, verses 3 and 4. In thus bringing a lamb from his flock, the sinner acknowledged his guilt and admitted that he was worthy of death. As he slew the animal, he demonstrated that he understood that the wages of sin is death, and that he was not worthy of life. The sacrifice also showed his belief that God accepted a substitute in his stead, and that the lamb died that he might live. Thus the sacrifice signified two things: man's acknowledgement of the justice of God in requiring punishment, and a demonstration of the mercy of God in providing and accepting a substitute to die in the sinner's place. On the sinner's part, it was an act of faith for him to accept the provision and follow precisely the rules for the offering of the sacrifice. I will pause here. We are halfway through chapter 1, and I will pick up and finish the next two sections in the next video. I hope you have a blessed day.